Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Boring Conversation. On today's episode, I have John Fox rejoining us. Hey, say hi to
Hello.
everybody, John. Hey, there he is. So John actually came up with a kind of a cool idea, kind of last minute, to talk about just overall summoning changes and why he and I think we're pretty much on the same page. And I'm gonna just spoiler it here. We don't think that the sky is falling with summoners. Is that correct, John?
That is correct. It's dark and cloudy, but it's not falling.
Right. So we kind of decided last minute that we were going to hop on to an episode together and talk a little bit about some of the major changes to summoners, talk about how they're going to have to deal with those changes, and go over some highlights of some individual summoning models that got significant changes and some that maybe didn't really see significant changes at all. So before we get into that, I think the most important question of the night is, John, what are you drinking tonight?
Oh, you know it. I got the Guinness. Got a good stout.
I was very, very tempted. I was thinking to myself, I bet he's probably going to have a Guinness. I almost grabbed a Murphy's Irish Stout, which between the two, Guinness and Murphy's is my preference. I like it. It's a little bit drier, but they're both fantastic. And I, at the last minute, because in Massachusetts, where I'm at, we actually just had our first 70 plus degree day today.
Nice. All right.
Um, so I've got my shorts on and my tank top, and I ended up grabbing a crispy business Kolsch style ale from one of my local favorite breweries, Mayflower Brewing, up in Plymouth. Uh, Kolsch ales are a German ale style, which is unusual because the vast majority of commonly known German beers are lagers.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of drinks a little bit like a lager, but it has a little bit more body, a little bit more backbone, and Kolsch's have a very particular yeast character to them. That's kind of like it's almost got like a little teeny bit of like a red apple um, ester character. Esters are like fruity byproducts of some yeasts. So now that I bored everybody with that little bit of beer trivia, uh, yeah, let's get to talking about the meat of the episode. So really, there were two major overarching changes to summoning in Gaining Grounds 2, both in the tournament play packet and in some changes to the core rules. So I'm not going to read them all verbatim because at this point everybody's pretty well familiar with them, but the highlights are that basically any model that gets summoned that doesn't normally get a summon upgrade from the action that brought it into play now gets a token. Uh, that token is counted as a summon upgrade for the purposes of effects that specify summoning upgrades. So, like Jackdaw can't treat him as upgrades for all his upgrade shenanigans, so on and so forth.
But
And the important thing
Vincent
is that,
does.
but Vincent and a few other models do, which we'll get to a little bit later. And then a key thing with it being a token is that it carries over if a model gets replaced, which is something that definitely can happen in a lot of crews. Models can get replaced, and sometimes things might fall off of them, but this one does not. So on the turn that they're summoned, summon models can't take the interact action and are ignored for the purposes of friendly schemes and strategies, keyword being friendly. And then additionally, on top of being ignored for friendly schemes and strategies and not being able to take the interact action, they also can't take the interact action to affect a strategy marker in any way for the rest of the game. So those are the big ones. We'll kind of get into why those are going to impact some of the key models that we're going to talk about as we go. But those two changes, in addition to some changes to individual summoning models or support models that they commonly take have really changed the landscape and how some of these masters and other models can play the game. So there's a lot of summoners out there. John and I kind of broke them down into three separate lists. So we're going to talk about each one in turn. Some of the models, especially the masters, we're going to dive a little deeper into how these changes affect them and their crews. And then some others we may mention, and we may not have an exhaustive list of every single model that summons in the game because there's a whole crapload of them. But we may mention some key models that are really impacted by these changes in our eyes. And then later on, we'll talk about how these masters and models can kind of adapt to the new landscape, learn how to replay the game. And then at the end of the episode, we're going to give some hot takes. We're going to talk about which summoning masters and models we feel like are going to see a lot of play. Also, maybe some that won't see as much play or really very little play at all because of some of these changes. So, John, was
Spoiler
there anything
alert.
you wanted? Yeah,
I was going to
go
say,
ahead.
spoiler alert, we could be very, very wrong about this. So one thing, it is so early in GG2 and these rule changes. We could be very, very wrong about this, but I think the both of us have probably play majority summoners, really. Like, I know you're a big Ken fan, but you've, definitely played a lot of summoner models as well. So
Yeah, both in Bayou and outside of Bayou, I've got quite a bit of experience with summoning masters and other models. I haven't played them all. That's one thing I'm gonna just throw as a big caveat to this episode is the vast majority, like the vast majority, probably 95% of this outside of any playtesting, is hot takes. John and I have not played with every single one of these models, or even the vast majority of these models since the various changes came out. So we could be wrong. We probably will be wrong, and there's probably a lot of people that may agree or disagree with a lot of the things that we have to say in this episode. So that said, just before we started recording, John said that he thinks it might be a good idea for us to revisit this topic in like 6 months. Once we've seen how GG2 pans out, once we've seen the way that the different metas have shifted, and that should give us a good sense of how right or wrong we were in this episode. So before we start diving into individual summoning masters, which is the next item up on the docket, John, did you have anything else to add?
I think it is important to note as well, and we'll talk a little bit about it as we get to the individual ones, is that you had quite a few summoners on the errata list as well. So that's going to make a difference, I think, I think one of the things I noticed instantly is like, I felt pretty okay with most of Sommer's stuff that had happened until the GG2 change happened. And it was like, yeah, it's doing good. And then that GG2 change came and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like this is rough. So I think it is important to note too that some of these masters will be up and down depending on how, like Karai got a little light touch. Sommer got hit pretty hard. Von Stuck got hit pretty hard. Dreamer got hit pretty hard. Those will also, I think, have an effect on like how well they do. But in general, I don't think anybody got pushed into unplayability. I think everyone is still a reliable in a reliable place for specific moments in the game instead of being um, good for everything. Like in GG1, you could bring Sommer into literally every pool, and you could do at least 3 schemes in the strategy reliably, and you wouldn't even have to sweat it. Now it's a little different. So I do want to say, because there will be a little salt in this, I do want to say like up front that like I think overall most of the changes are positive for the game, and I think that they're not like a complete nosedive to summoning as a mechanic. Um, but as we'll talk about when we get into like how are we going to work them, as we go, you're going to have to change how you play summoners, which is going to take a while for everybody to get used to.
Yeah, I think that we'll get into this a little bit more after we do some of the individual model deep dives. But you're absolutely right. Like, obviously, no great surprise to anybody. We're going to have to change how we play some of these guys. Some of them, much less so than others. So they're not going to require quite as much adjustment to the way that they play. But I think that there's a lot of stuff kind of under the surface that even those less affected models and masters are going to run into on a regular basis, and they're going to just be like, "Oh, shit, I can't do that now." When in the past they would have been able to pull off some janky stuff with summons and movement tricks and stuff, getting points scored on the turn that they summon models, or even using models to score points later in the game that suddenly they're not going to be able to. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But let's move into the individual model breakdowns. So I think it would probably be best, since you and I both have a good bit of experience, you much more so than I, with Summerteeth Jones, because a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about with regards to all of these models, we're probably going to bring up in conversation about Summer. So he saw quite a few changes. Both his stat card got changed, and the changes to gaining grounds and the core rules, I think, have an inordinately large effect on him and the way that his crew plays as compared to most of the other summoning masters, with the exception of maybe one or two. So, John, why don't you, would you being the person with the more experience with him, why don't you just tell me a little bit about what those changes mean, both on his card and otherwise, and we can kind of talk about my thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, well, like, so the first thing you got to look at is like everything on the card got adjusted a little bit, which is honestly the best way I think to do what they did. They were able to get all the changes they needed to make Big Hat sort of fit by only changing a single card, which was important. They didn't try to change Lenny and Sommer and Georgie and Olaf. They were able to kind of condense it into that single. Let's readjust Sommer a little bit. So Pig Eating Grin is once per turn or once per activation, which is fine. You can't chain gun it anymore. That's pretty important because there were definitely times where you could blow up 5 bottles and just murk somebody, like with Georgie and Olaf, like shoot 5 times is fine.
Okay, so talking about Summer and the various changes on his model, we've got right at the top, we've got "Wait, you ain't my kid" removed. So if I remember correctly, John, that was a trigger on his summon where if you hit a crow, meaning that you needed two different suits on it, you could not attach a summon upgrade to one of the models that you bring into play. It would basically increase the number of that particular model type that you could have. Um, they removed that basically as a housekeeping thing to make sure that his summon is consistent with the new summoning rules.
It also was I think it's a limiter on Summer as a secondary master, because there have definitely been games I've played with Sommer as a secondary master where I've hit that suit and I've had 4 or 5 models out by the end of turn 4 instead of just having the 2, which is that limiting factor that he's supposed to have as a secondary master. So that was good because it could get a little. I mean, like it was niche, but it could get a little out of control. So that is
Yeah.
mostly housekeeping. Mostly, you got this new token mechanic. We want to make things consistent. Makes sense to me. Honestly, I think that doesn't change him very much at all
Yeah.
as a primary.
Yeah, the secondary thing I think is really the big change there. And you know, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there was any other summoning master that had some sort of ability to bring in a model without an attached upgrade. He was the only one, right?
I think he was the only one. Yeah.
I think he was the only one. Yeah. So, like we said, consistency, and it definitely hurts him a little bit as a secondary master, which is actually something I hadn't even considered. So, okay, that's one down. That was an easy one. So the next one is Make Me Proud Boys. Was replaced with One for the Team. So for that one, basically, he could pick any big hat minion and blow them up as a one action to do a pulse of damage around him. It's now changed to being Bayou Gremlin only, I believe. So you can't blow up, 90% of the stuff that he's playing with, because he used to use a lot of minions. Now it's only Bayou Gremlins. And the big thing with that, which ties into the next ability, was that it could trigger Pig Eat and Grin, which I know you're going to have quite a bit to say about. So with the Make Me Proud Boys, I definitely think that switching it to Bayou Gremlin only was a good move. What do you think about it, John?
I mean, I still remember the days when I was blowing up test subjects for free. So my janky soul is sad, but also I absolutely understand. I agree. I think it's good. I think it helps play into kind of the way I played Sommer anyway, with sort of this disposable soldier idea of like tossing in guys, blowing them up, getting your upgrades back, going in and blowing them up again. Which it's fine. It's fine. I don't think it's a big deal at all, really.
And it's still super powerful. Like it's a 12-inch range. You target a Bayou Gremlin. The enemy doesn't get a resist. You kill the Bayou Gremlin. Everything within a pulse 2 takes 2 damage. You can still trigger Pig Eat and Grin with it, which is the next ability that we'll get to. You still get to use the demise ability on the Bayou Gremlin to draw a card. So like all of the stuff that it could do, you can still do. I believe that before there was no range or line of sight requirement, right? What was it? It was something like that.
I think it was no line of sight requirement.
Right, I believe it was no line of sight. So isn't it terrible how like these things just changed a couple of weeks ago and we already can't remember what the fuck
It
they
was
used to
range.
do?
It didn't have a range on it.
No
You
range.
could do
That's
it
what it
from
was.
across yeah,
Right. So now it's 12-inch range, which is fair. It still is super powerful. I mean, you're dealing unresistible damage and triggering Pig Eat and Grin for free shots. It's very good.
And they changed the name of it because no one really wants to associate anything with Proud Boys, really. So that's the reason the name got changed.
That's funny. I also had not thought of that at all.
Yeah. So.
All right. So the big one, Pig Eat and Grin. So John, why don't you tell me a little bit about the change to Pig Eat and Grin?
Okay, so there are actually 2 changes to Pig Eat and Grin, and one of them is surprisingly more important than the other.
Yes.
So Pig Eat and Grin now says once per activation, which is important because that means that you can't Make Me Proud, kill 3 Bayou Gremlins, shoot 3 times anymore. It takes away a lot of offensive capability of what Sommer's crew did, but honestly, because there were ways to cheat the system, it makes sense. Like for instance, you used to be able to use Big Brain Bryn to puppet strings a Bayou Gremlin, and then it dies at the end of turn, and then you get a Pig Eat and Grin at the end of the turn. All that stuff is out of activation stuff, and all that kind of shouldn't happen. It should be cleared up. It should be easier. It puts him a little bit more in line. I think. I think it was a little bit abusive when you could find those spots where you could get 3 Pig Eating Grins and literally kill something during its activation. Like, they go in, they kill a guy, and then you shoot it 3 times. Like that's nobody wants that. It's a feel bad. So
Yeah, it was super non-interactive. Your opponent really had very little that they could do about it. And if they ended up getting caught in a situation where they were getting machine gunned to death by Georgian Olaf or Lenny or a good old boy during their activation, it was a pretty negative play
this
experience.
feels
So
gross.
definitely, Yeah, it feels gross. It feels gross as the player doing it, even though you're still kind of cackling with glee. It was a good change, and it
Mhm.
needed to happen.
It also keeps a lot of like one of the problems you have with Sommer is playtime, because there's so many activations on the board. So if you're not making 3 or 4 shots in a single activation, you're also not taking up as much time in the game. So it streamlines him a little bit, and he's a little easier. Cuts down on that time that you're playing Sommer, and you're flipping cards and your opponent isn't flipping cards, and those kind of things. The second change to Pig Eating Grin that is very important, I did not realize until I played it how important it is it says the friendly model that is killed is the one discarding the card. So you can't anymore stack Expendable and the Pig Eating Grin, draw or discard in any way you choose. You have to discard first, then the model dies, then you draw the card.
Right. It
Um,
used to be that you could choose the order that you did that,
correct.
so you
Correct.
would always draw first and then choose which card you wanted to
So
discard.
now your hand is a little more important. Like if you're down on cards in your hand, you got that 13 sitting in your hand. You can't pick. You don't want to Pig Eat and Grin because you don't want to trade the 13 for a 1. So that's it's an important thing to note. And anybody, probably less important for people that are starting Sommer versus people that like have been playing him for a while, because we've been playing him for a while one way. It's almost second nature to like, oh, I'll discard the card, then I'll draw the card, then I'll draw and then I'll discard.
Yeah, exactly. All the people with a fresh start on this, they're not going to have any trouble. The veteran Sommer players is going to be
But it's surprisingly impactful. Even though you do draw a ton of cards still when you're playing Sommer, it's impactful the order in which you draw those cards and discard
yeah,
those cards.
for sure. So, kind of moving on to the next one. This is easy. Bayou 2 card used to, let anyone within an aura of Summer cheat off the top of the Fate deck. Now it's once per activation, and only during the model's own activation.
So no defensive flips.
This I think is probably, in my opinion, the biggest change to Summer
Mm-hmm.
overall.
Mm-hmm.
Because not being able to cheat off the top of the Fate deck for defensive flips is such an enormously big deal.
And I'm probably gonna hurt a lot of Bayou feelings here, but it was necessary.
It
Oh,
was
it
too
hurts to say. It
good.
hurts to say, but yeah, no, it really was
Yeah,
necessary. It was too good, and that's anybody that played against Sommer constantly, Bayou 2 card was the thing that they bitched about, like that and Lenny Aura. And since
yeah.
they didn't want to change the Lenny Aura, you know, the bottom line is you're playing Sommer, your models are a lot easier to kill now. It's okay, but because if you just adapt to the style that I play Sommer, doesn't matter. Just kill your guys. Who cares? Send them, yeah, send them to their doom.
It definitely needed to happen because for a model for a master that has a ton of card draw, which got a little bit adjusted, but still has a ton of card draw, and a bunch of models that are stat 6 and 7 defense and willpower, and being able to cheat off the top of the deck anytime they want, as many times as they want. His hand was always stacked with cards, and you couldn't just take random attacks against him and hope that they would hit or hope to draw cards out of his hand, because he has so many expendable models and the Bayou 2 card plus the high stats. He would just say, I'll just flip off the top of the deck and see what happens.
Absolutely. It was, I mean, it was, even playing it, you're just like, this is absurd. And I, like, here we are. I flipped my entire deck 3 times in a turn because I brought Bryn. I did the calculate, and so now, yeah, I've just flipped through my whole deck 3 times. I've seen the red Joker at least twice. Like,
Yeah, it
nobody
was really
wants that.
filthy.
Yeah.
It had to go. And the way they changed it is fine. And if you're really dead set on being able to buy you 2 card defensively and as many times as you want, you can still take the effigy. It's a smaller aura. You have to activate it first. It's there
Yep.
if it really hurts your feelings. So there you
And
go.
And the thing is too, the thing that I like about this and looking at it and um, having been in the beta, the playtest trying to work through all this is so I've got quite a few games in with Sommer because I wanted to make sure, he's my boy. I wanted to make sure he came out, at least able to do something and not trashed. It gives you a little more flexibility between the Pig Green card and the Bayou 2 card change. It gives you a little more flexibility to make like small summer fire teams. So you still want three models close to each other because you want your Bayou Bash, but you don't have to rely on being within 6 inches of Sommer quite as much as you used to. And so there's a sort of freedom that you can you can take two good old boys and a Bayou Gremlin and move them up the board on one edge. You can take, these guys and move them over here, and you're not quite as like center clumped um, as often as you have to be when you played him back in GG1. So
Yeah, for sure. It definitely it does offer you a little bit more freedom without feeling like you're really nerfing your own ability to play the game at the highest level. So, and then the last change to Summer, and I think that he's the only summoner that actually saw this particular change, but his primary summon ability, Extended Family, had its stat reduced from 6 down to a 5, and that
RIP
is
5 Bayou
also
Gremlins.
right. So no more 5 Bayou Gremlins. I believe it also means that you can't summon a good old boy and a Bayou Gremlin
You need a Red
anymore unless you
Joker.
Red Joker,
Mm-hmm.
which
You need a Red
is
Joker.
almost certainly not worth it.
Yeah.
That's a really big deal.
Yeah.
Not being able to summon a good old boy and a Bayou Gremlin. It really, really hurts.
It does. It does.
Yeah. You can still summon multiples with, pretty much any other minion. You can still do 2 Skeeters and a Bayou Gremlin, I think, for a 13. So, that's not terrible. But, yeah, the no good old boy plus Bayou Gremlin is rough, especially because of the way that the crew works and needing to bunch up to make sure that your models are effective. And good old boys in particular have very low stats. So if they're not near other friendlies, they really have a hard time hitting. I think their base stat on their melee is a
4.
4.
Yeah. Yep.
So they really need to have 2 friendlies near them for Bayou Bash. So this is the only change on Summer that I think may have been too much. Um, it doesn't change the way he plays to the same degree as Bayou 2 card. I personally view this as a bit excessive, but what do you think, John?
I mean, nobody else in the game is able to summon 5 models. You know,
Right,
what
and
I
so
mean?
do you think it's a Bayou Gremlin problem specifically?
Maybe because so pre this, I would always look at my hand and say, where can I summon a model and? I need a Bayou Gremlin and because when you summon that Bayou Gremlin because of expendable, you're basically banking a card for later in the game or later in the turn. Like it's effectively taking your severe and making it another card later, which is good. I mean, it's incredibly good. So I don't know. Like I said, pre the GG2 change, I was like, most of these changes are pretty okay. Like I get them, I understand them. Then you tax on the rules change to insignificant when they come into play, and then not being able to hit strat markers, and now you've got to you don't have as much flexibility with your summon. It's a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And especially where he now has to use Bayou Gremlins for the team, and you're making it essentially impossible for him to hire his primary damage dealing model plus a Bayou Gremlin so that he won't have the opportunity to buff that model or use another Bayou Gremlin in a good position for one for the team.
And that's
Yeah.
where that's where Me personally, that's where I see Sommer's play style changing a whole lot. Is and I think we might see the same thing with Sandeep, because Sandeep and Sommer are very similar. I think in a lot of the ways that they can do things,
Hmm.
and a lot of their
Yeah, definitely.
mechanics are very similar. Um, Sommer's a toolbox, and he's a weird toolbox because he doesn't specifically have a scheming summon, except that a crier is kind of a scheming summon.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
But he doesn't have, he can't summon a mounted guard to go run
Right.
and do.
Yeah, there's no mounted guard, there's no Shikome, there's no Katashiro,
Right.
none of those like primo scheming summons, which of course got hit across the board.
Hmm.
Um, but even the way that Summer used to be able to deep scheme with his summons got changed because of GG. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, we're not trying to make this into like a Summer errata deep dive, but you know, we've gone on for quite a while on him. So I guess let's just kind of take a look at the overall summoning changes, and how do you think that Summer plays now? How does he, minus all of the other errata changes, fit into the new landscape of summoning?
um, I think he's still strong. I think if you look at the problem with Sommer's still good. GG2 is not Sommer's bag. There's just not a lot of strats that Sommer does very well. For instance, he used to be able to do symbols of authority really well because you could just get a skeeter out, hit it with the crier, take it. Now you have to be very very careful because you can only get 2 skeeters that are allowed to eat markers, the strat
Right.
markers. So
And you
you
used to be able to treat his Skeeters as very expendable models because they were easy to summon back in. But now, I mean, if you're trying to do scheming with him, you almost need to try and protect those two Skeeters, which
you're
is
probably holding them back till turn 3 for sure.
right. And that really has a big impact on his
Hmm.
style because you can't use them as speed bumps with impunity anymore.
I think you're gonna want to look for scheme pools where Sommer is going to be able to control the middle. So turf war
Yeah.
maybe is kind
Yeah.
of, yeah. Um, he can he can do he can do break the line if the rest of the pool fits, maybe. But I think we have better masters for that, and I think that's one thing that you're going to see with most of the, at least both the toolbox summoners, is that they used to be generalists who did everything really well. Now they're generalists who do everything okay.
Yeah, and to your point about him with holding the center, I feel like that is something that is gonna be the niche that a lot of the summoners fall into now if they weren't already there. Is they're good at holding the center. They're good at scoring. They're decent at scoring turf war because they can get the back two markers. The center one's always going to be contested. They're going to be decent at ley lines because like anybody can get 3 points on ley lines. It's not that difficult.
Hmm.
Um, break the line. Maybe some of them are going to be fine in, and yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about that. Yeah, we'll get there. I'm getting ahead of myself.
For Sommer specifically, I think that you're looking at like, um, you have to have a scheme pool that he fits into now, instead of bringing Sommer and just playing the scheme pool, playing like into anything. For instance, like we're talking about turf war. Turf war should probably be Sommer's best strategy. However, Sommer doesn't eclipse Ophelia anymore for that strategy. Like Ophelia is kind of a better almost all around, but there are going to be pools where Sommer does a little bit better because of how his crew works uniquely. Because
Yeah.
Ophelia is not very good at scheming either, Sommer is going to be better at scheming because your Gremlin Criers are still going to get around that summon. The summon. They do not get around the strategy change. They do get around the not being able to interact or not being insignificant for that turn. So,
well, I mean, yeah, it lets them still make insignificant models interact. I mean, they still can't interact the turn they come in. They still can't interact with the strategy marker for the entirety of the game, but they still have the shtick where they can make Skeeters and Bayou Gremlins interact when normally they wouldn't be able to at all.
so you can probably from now on, my first turn is going to be summon 4 Bayou Gremlins, and then my next turn is going to be from then on is probably summoning Criers or Spit Hogs, depending on whether I want to go schemy or aggressive. But I think you're hiring good old boys now more often than you're summoning them, and I think you're probably hiring. You're not hiring Bryn anymore because he just doesn't overclock your deck like with Bayou 2 card like he used to.
See, it's funny because I would actually say that he almost overclocks it more. And so here's my reasoning behind that. So it used to be that you would use Bryn, you'd thin the deck down by 10, and then halfway through that turn, you'd already decked yourself, and all those cards that you discarded went right back into the deck. Now, because it's taking you longer to deck yourself, his ability to filter out those 10 cards actually goes a little further.
You might be right.
I mean, am I off base in this?
No, you might be right. I didn't think about that. You're very possibly correct.
Yeah, because you're probably only going to deck yourself. You might not even deck yourself at this point with Bayou 2 card being nerfed so much, although you still have a lot of activations. But, decking yourself once versus, and just barely doing so versus doing it 2 or even, God forbid, 3 times, which I've seen happen,
I've done it.
is a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there is a little more room now for him to bring some out of keyword models. And you're effectively probably using your summons to either help you hit that the Bayou Bash, or just get in the way. Spit Hogs are great at just getting in the way, or you're going to summon your Criers probably from turn 3 on. You're summoning Criers because the cool thing is the Crier can't interact the turn he comes into play, but he can obey people to interact the turn he comes into play.
So yeah, exactly. So I guess the other thing I would say, and this is something that I'm sure is probably going to come up with some of the other summoners, and the thing that people have been saying on the internet, since this change came out, is now you're going to have to hire your schemers and summon your utility models or your beaters. So I think that depending on when you take summer, it's probably going to be turf war and maybe I think ley lines is really the big one that he's still going to be decent at. Because you don't actually have to interact with the strategy marker, you just have to be near it. You can't put the football on the insignificant models like the Skeeters and Bayou Gremlins, and you probably wouldn't want to anyway because they die too easy. But we have better football carriers in the faction. So in like turf war and stuff, let's say you're not hiring in your schemers. How are you scoring it?
Probably taking one model that can, like the emissary, or just something that has that's fast to get up there.
Right. Right. And that's kind of what I was getting at, as I wasn't trying to hem you into a corner, but I feel like you do still have to hire your schemers.
A good old boy with 12 cups is pretty solid.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're having to hire your good old boy instead of summoning it, and you're having to hire some schemers instead of summoning them, in a sense, that's actually reducing your ability to hire other tech pieces or out of keywords. It's almost squeezing you into a mold where now you have to have your keyword models and you have to have these other out of keyword or versatile models so that you can actually score and play the game. And it makes it a lot harder to fit stuff in like Bryn or one of a number of other things.
And you're probably not always taking all, I definitely think that there are scheme pools I'm going to look at and go, I might not take Georgian Olaf this time.
Ooh, that is sacrilege.
I know, right? But he's not
Yeah.
he's not going to be the autogun turret that he used to be. He's still
Yeah.
good, still a great model, still solid. Probably still going to be a pick 85% of the time. But there could be times where you just want to flood the board with minions and
Could be.
let it go. You know.
All right, so we've talked kind of ad nauseum about summer, and a lot of the stuff that we've talked about it is going to apply to some of these other masters as well. So I know you already mentioned Sandeep. Sandeep's another one of them that I think got hit pretty hard, and for him, the only thing that changed for him was Kandara reducing the amount of card draw that he gets significantly, and the other summoning changes and the focus changes in combination with the way that replaces work, and were adjusted some time ago. So um, having played against Sandeep, quite a few times, him not being able to summon End Windgammon to go score the strat is a big
Mhm.
deal.
Do you think that we're going to see more of, and forgive me for just destroying it, the Shatar Vista guards?
Shasta video guards.
There you go.
It's funny because I talked about that a little bit with Adam on the last episode, and I looked at him a bit more. Maybe I don't. They're cool models. They're still expensive, and the niche that they fill is not one that you couldn't fill with models that you'd still summon in, like summoning in Gammon to turn into golems and what have you, or hiring in a couple of Gammon. I mean, like taking one Shasta Video Guard versus hiring two Gammon and then summoning one more so that you can make a golem. Like, I don't know. Like, they don't do enough other stuff, in my opinion. So I don't know. I don't know that the academics see more play. I know Adam. Well, yeah. Anyway, we'll see. As far as Mr. Sandeep goes, I mean, his poison bombing thing didn't really change. His ability to summon big gribbly golems and smash your face and hold the center really didn't change. The only big difference is that he can't score with those big golems as readily or at all, depending on what you're going for. So and that kind of sucks for him. He can't summon a golem in with focus a bazillion anymore, which is fair.
Yeah.
But the
Um,
Windgammon thing is a big deal.
and I think, and I think too, like Sandeep gets a little bit of a head up over Sommer because he can bring in um, big beefy golems when he needs. Now it's a
Right.
little more work, but like than say Karai for bringing in beaters or Dashel for bringing in beaters, but he can still bring in beaters, and I think that's one of the points where like for me, Sommer is fell lower on the totem than the rest of the summoners. Is good old boys are great, solid, cool models. They're not beaters. They're not murdering the field,
They're
right?
not
Like
ice golems. They're not Goryo. They're
they're not an
not,
executioner.
not
Yeah.
executioners. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Sommer is having to hire beaters in to do the work. And so I think the Sandeep is still good, but I also think that with the Colette changes and some of the, it'll be interesting to see where Arcanists level out after all this. I think the two factions right now that I'm very interested in seeing where they end up leveling out are Arcanists, even though on the surface Arcanists didn't seem to get that many changes, and Rezzers, who got a crap ton of changes.
Yeah. I mean, my hot take is I feel like in Arcanists we're going to see a lot more Hoffman, and I feel like we're going to see a lot more Karis.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Karis was already extremely powerful. And I think honestly I don't like ranking masters, but I would say she's definitely near the top of the pack in Arcanists right now. And I've always thought Hoffman was fantastic and way underplayed. And I think he's gonna do very well in GG2.
Yeah. but he's not a summoner. So let's who you want to
He's
talk
not
about
a
next?
summoner. Yeah, so let's talk about Kirai and how I don't think she got hit nearly hard enough.
Karai's fine. Karai doesn't care because Karai, I mean, the majority now. Some people might play Karai differently than I've seen Karai played. They just hired Chikome anyway, and then just murdered you with Goryo and
Yeah.
literally just shoved Akirio and Goryo down your face.
Yeah, I mean
And
Kirai's playstyle literally like doesn't change almost at all.
yeah,
The only difference is that her summons aren't as readily going to be able to score things like deathbeds,
right.
research mission, outflank.
Agorio's not going to be
Um,
able to kill you and then step over and take the symbol. Like,
exactly. Like there's a lot of stuff, and this is kind of getting back to that under the surface stuff with summoning that like a, all of the summoners are going to have to contend with, and the more aggressive summoners are going to notice more often, and that's that their aggro summons, which some of them fall into that niche,
mhm,
can't score a lot of those things as readily.
yeah.
And I think that that's probably going to catch people by surprise. They're gonna be used to doing, do your summons with your summoning model, push that summons activation off until the point that you can score, and then suddenly realize, oh crap, I can't actually score with this now.
And I think the same, and I think we're going to see the same thing when we talk about Asami too. Asami is just going to summon big butts and smack you in the face, and it's going to be yokai. It's going to be Jorgumo,
Yeah.
and that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Asami right now. So, I mean, we're leading right into it. So, Asami, I've played her a good bit. She's really a great toolbox summoner. I think more so than people give her credit for, because a lot of people play her and they just hire Joraguma or summon Joragumo, and you end up with three giant spiders on the table smashing stuff up, and you've spent 2 or 3 turns getting those on the table, and you haven't hired in schemers. And she had some fantastic ones like Tengu, um, not Kunoichi, the paper demons. What are they called?
Kadashiro.
Katashiro, the other K word. Yeah. So I think I said Kunoichi before.
Yeah.
Whatever. So anyway, she had all these great schemers on the wings, like Katashiro, Tengu, Akaname. Plus, she had yokai that could both beat and scheme really, really well. Her summons are all so damn good, and I feel like a lot of the schemy tricks that they have are definitely getting like brought down a peg or a couple of pegs in some cases. Um, Akaname can still drop scheme markers as non-interact action, which I think is going to make them a more attractive summon, even though they die real easy. Um, and they can kind of jam up models and create little areas of board control, and still be able to drop scheme markers, which is cool because I mean, there's actually some stuff that they're going to be pretty solid for. But the poor Katashiro, I mean, they're not garbage, but they took a pretty significant hit.
Yeah, I agree with that. Kadashiro are they still? I mean, they can still come in and wipe out a scheme runner or a weak model pretty easily with made to kill and
Yeah, I think you're going to see them being used as a cheap aggro model that can also do some scheming later in the game. Um, I think that they're going to fill a gap. Well, not a gap. They're going to fill the same niche that yokai fill now,
mhm.
um, but with a little bit more reliable means of getting out of combat after the turn that they're summoned in, even though their damage track isn't quite as good. So,
Yeah.
yeah. The one of the cool things about Tengu is that they can kind of do the same thing that what do you call it? Gremlin criers do in summer, because even though they can't interact on the turn that they come in or interact with strategy markers when you summon them, they can still use their bonus action Dark Bargain to make another friendly model within. Well, it doesn't have to be another; it can be themselves, but to make a friendly model within 6 inches take the interact action. So
Right.
they're one of the rare exceptions where you can summon in a model and use it to get an interact off on the same turn that they get summoned in.
Yeah,
So
I think everything's. I mean, I feel like Asami barely got touched. Um,
Yeah, you're gonna have to be real. You're gonna have to change up the way that you plan out your summons, but I think by and large, she's still doing just fine.
I do really like the fact that it was made clear in the fact that with Sommer and Asami specifically, because of the way their cards are worded, you cannot summon out of line of sight.
Yeah,
It's very important.
yeah, you could do some goofy stuff before summoning on the other side of
Yeah,
buildings
yeah,
and
yeah.
stupid crap like
Had
that.
it had my whole day ruined turn one because of that in a Obsidian Oni
Yeah,
kind of
for
game.
sure. So yeah, I think I agree. She's still in a good spot. You still have to be pretty smart about playing her because she's definitely never. She's. I mean, I don't know. She can kind of be a brute force summoner, but then her shit just disappears if you go
Yeah,
too heavy with them. She's one of the summoners that appeals to me the most in the game, and yeah, I'm excited to play her
she's
still.
very strong, very strong.
Very very strong.
Um,
So who do you want to move on to? Do you want to
Dash.
do Dashel?
Yeah,
Sure.
he's the one I know probably the best after these guys. Um, Dashel is still a freaking powerhouse. I mean, I think he's gonna summon mounted, or he's gonna hire mounted guards instead of summoning now. But so that just means get ready to see more executioners and riflemen. Dogs still suck. Literally, no one's ever going to summon them, even though you could summon 3 or 4 of them. Weird if you listen to any podcast at all. Just take mindless off of the stupid dogs.
Yeah, I mean they've changed from a model that you barely ever summon and s- hire maybe slightly more often to a model that it's just not
Why?
going to get taken.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why?
they're not good.
Um,
I mean, I feel like so you said he's still a powerhouse. I agree, he's still very good. I feel like he actually got hit kind of hard in this because yeah, you have to now summon your mounted guard, and yeah, they're still super fast. So like, it's not like they're going to have a hard time getting to the other side of the table. I think that executioners not being able to count for friendly strategies and schemes the turn that they're summoned is a really big deal because they are such hard hitting models.
yeah. I think I do think you're going to have to look at what schemes you take for him, and you're going to have to keep that in mind. For
Yeah.
instance, Deathbeds is going to be a tough one, but Executioners have Scatter, which
Hmm.
is one of the most broken abilities in the game. Sorry,
Yeah.
I hate to use the word broken. Scatter's a freaking broken ability.
Yeah. I mean,
And
yeah. It takes an AP, no resist, and it wins games.
it wins games. It does. So
Yeah.
Corrupted Leylines is still in the pool. Executioners are still going to be good.
Yeah, for sure. They're definitely still good. I just be executioners and riflemen. I think it's those are some of the models that you're going to get caught off guard with. Oh shit, I can't score with these this turn. More than I think a lot of other.
I'll be interested to see if Queeg starts getting play again, because the mad scientist in me looks at Break the Line and goes, I can give focus, have it, have a model get fast and push the marker 3 times, and so maybe, I don't know. Queeg's still
Yeah,
bad,
yeah,
but
I hadn't thought about it. I mean, Queek, he still dies real easy, but you're right in that he enables break the line very well. But
yeah.
yeah, he's solid for it.
But I think Dashel's still good. But once again, I think that it's kind of like Sommer in that there are, you can look at the guild faction and go, well, Dashel was pretty much the best choice here most of the time. To, well, Nelly looks really good now with these changes, so Nelly's
Yeah,
going to be really good. If you're playing Break the Line, you're probably playing Nelly. If you're playing Turf War, you're probably play Dashel or Perdita. Perdita can still, like, Perdita got hit pretty hard, but like Dita can still do
Yeah.
turf war.
Dietz is good too because she really helps you deny a lot of the schemes that are in the pool now. Like she's real good for denying outflank. She's good for denying deathbeds, detonate charges, all sorts of stuff
So
like
I
that.
love that.
So,
I love that Dash is still good. He's still a top playmaster, but he is just not going to be the take every single time. Like you're not going to look at 3 or 4 pools in a tournament and go, yeah, Dash does all of these, which I'm fine with, because what I didn't want to see is I didn't want to see third edition get sucked into the formula we saw at the end of second, where generalist masters just got taken with all-star teams and won games.
yeah. So speaking of winning games, let's talk about Tara. Because I think well, we'll get to this in the hot takes. I'm going to spoil one of mine right now. I think she is super solid in GG2, even with the summoning changes. They didn't. I don't feel like they hit her too very hard. It just means that you hire in a couple of void wretches at the start of the game, and then you focus more on summoning the dogs, the void hunters. She's, yeah. I don't. Having seen her on the table, I really don't feel like she's affected by the GG or by the summoning changes very much, and she is very much so enabled um, in GG2.
She's still probably doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's
for sure.
the that's Terra is the one doing most of your summoning or most of your scheming, especially late game. I think that's just she's
Yeah,
popping across the board, getting your
yeah,
schemes
that's her
done.
job.
The Talos buff is super good for her. It allows her to play more aggro. As far as the summon changes specifically for her, yeah, you're probably hiring, but I think even then you were probably gonna hire the Midnight Stalker anyway. Still, he's still good. And Terra, like Terra's gonna score your strats. You're gonna summon guys on turn one. Like probably start turn one summoning 2 wretches, and then after that you're summoning the big boys. Just go in and honestly, I don't even think they're going in and really killing things. They're just going in and roadblocking things. Like,
Yeah, they're just jamming stuff up.
yeah. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, Terra having that pressure of not having the ley lines is still there, but recover evidence was hard on her. And she really didn't have a huge amount of collect the bounty to do. Um, I think she's got a lot of good play, got a lot of schemes that she wants to do. Um, they put some pressure on Leviticus to make him not quite as top dog. So yeah, I think she'll be fine.
Yeah,
I think
I think she's going to see a
I
lot
think
of
she
play.
came out a lot better than a lot of the other ones. Like I said, out of all the summoners, I feel like Sommer. I think Sommer is the big
Yeah, he got hit the hardest.
the big loser here. Not to say, because oh my gosh, the forums and the Bayou chat is going to just ride me into the ground. Sommer's not bad. Sommer just took the biggest hits.
Right. Now, speaking of biggest hits, probably the master that I think took the second biggest hit is Dreamer, and it was justified.
Yeah.
So, let's talk Dreamer.
He's still good.
Yeah.
I've played him several times now outside of this. I think he's fine. He has 2 very significant changes. Number 1, he can no longer summon Stitched. Number 2, he has to dump cards back into his he has dump cards back that he has removed, half the cards that he removed. The not summoning Stitched is hurtful, because only specifically because of it's kind of like with Sommer. Before the GG2 change hit, it was looking like, okay, we can handle this. I still got lots of good control. now like you've got to summon, or you've got to own the significant models in the game, hire the significant models beforehand. Like you can't pocket summon a madness and expect it to score symbols for you anymore.
Right. And that said, Madness are still great for
So
scheming. They're
so
phenomenal
good.
models. Come to find out, Alps are really fucking good.
Alps are
Which
yeah.
I always knew that.
Alps are
Because they're
monsters.
super annoying.
Once again, made to kill is a fantastic ability.
Yep. They are
And yeah,
great.
you're gonna hire. You're probably either gonna hire Vasilisa or you're gonna hire Widow Weaver anyway. You're probably gonna hire now like 1 or 2 stitched, and you're probably gonna hire a Madness to start of the game. Like you just have to think now, guys. Like that's the I sorry to kind of sound a little rude about it, but you now have to think when you play a summoner. You don't just
Yeah.
get to like drop whatever you want in mid game and go, man, I'm glad I worked so hard for that.
Yeah, no kidding. So I mean, Dreamer, I would tend to agree. He's still in a good spot. He's not as OP super NPE as he used to be.
And he's not
But he
always the
can
correct
still,
answer anymore.
and
That's
he's not
the
always the correct answer. Exactly. Which is kind of, it seems like that's really where they were going with most of these.
That's so good for
They've
Neverborn. Like
succeeded. Yeah, I mean, they succeeded to a greater degree with some factions than with others. But
anybody who was a Dreamer player beforehand, look at the rest of your faction. Like pick up Euripides. He's fun. I've been playing him a lot lately. He's a lot of fun. Come up with something bizarre to play with Lucius. If you haven't tried Lucius and Two Mature Nephilims, you haven't lived yet.
yeah, and
Like
you know, not to interrupt, but one of the things with Dreamer in particular, and this applies to most of the other summoners with the exception of Sommer himself, you can still play the same game with Dreamer that you used to play.
mhm.
Like, you're throwing a couple of cards back in the deck. You can't hire Stitched, or you can't summon Stitch, but you can still hire him. You can still summon him with one of these other models. You can literally still play the same way that you did and be effective.
Yeah. The difference is that by end game, your deck hasn't turned from a Volvo to a Ferrari.
Right.
And that's okay because it wasn't fair. It
Right.
wasn't okay. Like everybody knew that, and this doesn't take away that much power. Like it, I think it still kind of hurts if you. I think you have to have that hired stitched because it does
Yeah.
really hurt more when you get that 13, 12, 11 lucid dream, and you're like, man, now I gotta
Yeah.
discard my.
But
So
and to that point, now if that does happen and you don't have the Stitched, you actually have a way to get them back into your deck,
yeah,
which you did not previously. So
yeah.
in that sense, well, the Dreamer change to lucid dreaming and having to put half your cards back in most of the time is a bad thing. There are definitely situations that it's actually a good thing too.
Well, juxtaposed by that, having a severe out of your deck for 2 turns in a row really sucks.
Yeah, exactly.
you, it might not statistically suck that much, but it feels like
It
it. Like
sucks.
you're looking there going, oh, I wanna punch you right now. What could be cute though? What could be cute, and just thinking of goofy things, is if you play a Dreamer Euripides list, and then you purposefully put high cards in your discard pile at the beginning of your turn, so you have some old ways
That's
standing.
cute. That's cute. Good thinking. All right, so that brings us to the last of our primary summoners, and after this, the rest of the stuff is going to go a lot faster. Obviously, we were going to spend a lot more time on these guys, but the last one is English Ivan, the new guy, a new kid on the block, and
And
my own
that's
personal
your bay.
heartthrob. That's my bay. So yeah, he barely got touched.
Hmm.
Um, he's still awesome. The changes. certainly affect him in the sense that he can't, and just like we've said, like I can't summon in a Brocken or a Deva and swing with it and score these specific schemes. You were never going to score strategies with your summons most of the time. If you summon a Nocturne, it's usually a summon of last resort because you literally have no other option. And like, too bad, so sad, you can't interact with a strategy marker with a Nocturne. I can't even remember the last time I had to do that in 15 plus games with him. Like,
You're hiring, aren't you hiring Ava in to go do your?
you're always hiring Eva. You're always hiring some other schemey type model. Like, for me, it would usually be like a Botanist or Vernon and Wells or the Damned or something like that. Like, you were doing that anyway because his summons can't accomplish that job by and large. So there might be some situations where you get gotcha'd and can't score something with one of your summons because you just summoned it and you can't, score a scheme or whatever. But like, he really didn't get touched. And I would say, with the exception of Kirai, who really only got touched aside from the summoning changes by the changes to Ikirio, which, if I may be misspeaking, but I think they're primarily meant to be to affect her as a second hire.
Yeah.
Ivan got affected the least, in my opinion, of any of the primary summoning masters by these changes.
Yeah. He's just gonna spoiler it and jump to a hot take. He's one of the best masters in the game, hands down.
Yeah, he kind of is. We'll get to that, and I think that now that he has official rules and stuff, I know I'm planning on talking about Ivan on some other podcasts, and I'm certainly going to be talking about him more on here because
He's so good.
I want to make you all sick of my voice.
Yeah, he's so good.
Basically, he's so good. All right, so the next category that we were going to talk about was summoning adjacent masters. So I define that as those who summon as a secondary aspect of their playstyle or synergize with other summoners in their crews. So there's a whole bunch of them. We're not going to talk about most of them at length because a lot of the incidental summons or summoners are things like Lynch, Colette, Sonya, Leviticus, McMorning. None of those. I mean, I guess Von Stuck to a certain degree. I don't think that I would term Von Stuck as a primary summoner, which is the reason that we didn't talk about him in the last.
I think he needs. I think he needs time. I think it's way too early. Like, so much of how he plays got changed that we need to let the dust settle and see like what his new play style is before we can even really jump on that. Because I think I think it needs time for the best Von Stuck players to look and say, what does he even do anymore? Personally, I feel like he's going to be a much more grindy. He's going to be a meat grinder, kind of like the old Nicodeme, like, which is fine. I think that's perfect. I think that Rezzers don't really have that right now, so they went from like the slowest, creepiest, grindiest, attritioniest faction to the most like movement aggressive faction. So that's fine. But there are a couple, like thinking of a couple of these adjacent summoners that a lot of things changed for. Hamlin is probably one.
Yeah. He got done dirty. Hamlin got done dirty.
Between the focus changes and the fact that the Rat Catcher is a summon, so you can't like derp out Rat King and then pop it into a Rat Catcher and then score your strategies. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, Hamlin got done kind of dirty. We talked about that a little bit at the tail end of the last episode, so we don't need to go into great detail on it now. A lot of that's the stuff that John and I have talked about offline, unless you had anything else to add.
So sad, just sad, because I have a whole Hamlin crew. I painted all 25 models in that keyword, and I'm looking at him now going, hey.
Yeah, I mean, it's really too bad because like he was already I feel like a not very common take in
Too Rube
Outcasts.
Goldberg.
He was too
Too much
Rube
work.
Goldberg, and he's still too Rube Goldberg, and now also has to deal with the fact that he saw some significant
Yeah.
indirect
Maybe
nerf.
if they had made the Ratcatcher summon a replace instead, wouldn't hurt. That'd have been all right.
That would have been way better. Yeah.
I think the other thing is too, like, the bookkeeping now, especially with Hamlin's the one I think, and maybe Nexus as well. The bookkeeping of, well, I hired this rat, but I summoned this rat, but I replaced this rat to do this. Like, I never bring more than one rat card to the table. So, like, I don't want to bring a whole bunch of, like, I don't want tokens like following models up the board, and I don't want to bring a whole bunch of cards to put tokens on. So, like, when it comes to it, like, just the opportunity, like, of how much setup do I have to play this master? Suddenly, I just look at Hamlin and go, buddy, your work. Like, I could just play Von Schill and punch people and be fine. Like,
Yeah, for sure.
give me Vix. We're good.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a whole nother side conversation. But like back, before the summoner changes and before the Salmer changes, a lot of people said that Salmer was the best master in Bayou. I always contended that Mawtucket was 99% as good as him and 20% as hard to play.
And is
And
and more efficient.
and more efficient. And now I feel like she's just head and shoulders
Yeah.
on top of Bayou,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's another episode. So, I mean, I think that as far as the summon adjacent masters, the ones that I'd be the most interested to talk about, aside from Hamlin, are I do want to just touch on Nexus. I'll be honest, I personally don't have any experience playing against Cadmus. So everything I say is based on internet speak and my assessment of the cards. It doesn't seem to me like this is really going to impact her a whole lot because the only things that she was really summoning were eyes and ears and they were getting turned into berserker husks and like that they kind of fall into the same spot as like the Ivan summons just with a few more
Yeah.
steps in
I
between. Is
think,
that
but I think it's also like you do have to be careful about what schemes you can score, because if your Berserker Husks are doing most of your killing, then Deathbeds is, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but
um,
I mean they have other ways of killing stuff in
yeah.
Cadmus from at least from what I can see.
And
So
I mean, yeah, I think the GG changes are going to be bigger. Like, the actual scheme and strategy changes are going to be bigger on taking Nexus down a peg than the summoning changes. I think it's going to be harder for him to score, just dominate.
there've been a lot of other people that have, waxed poetic on Cadmus and all the
Yeah.
reasons that they're busted. So like I don't need to just be another voice in the crowd on that one.
No.
But yeah, it seems like the summoning changes didn't really impact them much. The GG changes may have. But I still yeah, I don't
I
know.
agree.
I'm not
I
speaking
agree.
from a position of experience there. So
But I do need to go on the record online on the podcast, because I've heard some people talking some crap, and we need to have this discussion right here. It might, like, derail us just a little bit, but
it's okay.
my boy Ulix, he
Mm,
needs he needs to be, I think Ulix might be a better master in GG2 than he was in GG1. So many more scheme markers, so many more scheme marker placement effects, and I think that he is the best break the line master in the game.
yes. Actually, I would tend to agree. It's funny because you and I haven't actually talked about this one on one. It's funny because when the GG changes first came out, I looked at them. When the various changes came out, I looked at him and I just lamented Ulix's fate because I was like, he is garbage now. He can't do anything with the little piglets that get summoned. The sow is crap. why I didn't like her before, and now she's awful.
The sow is garbage.
Um,
Ulix is not garbage.
right,
You don't bring the sow. Just hire 3 or 4 piglets.
right. And
Easy.
then I got to thinking about Break the Line,
Yeah.
and I said, okay, well, and then I got to thinking about Turf War, and I'm like, okay, well, Turf War fits perfectly into the super aggressive, tanky way that I play Ulix. Break the Line is very solid for him because of because of the sheer number of movement tricks and action economy that his crew has, assuming he draws the right cards. And Break the Line in particular fits very well into the way that you play Ulix. So yeah, I think that core mechanics of his crew aside, which we've talked about at length on another episode, he is in a much better place in GG2 than he was in 0 or 1.
Yeah. And you can easily hire 3 piglets, turn at least 1 or 2 of them into wild boars, and there's your schemers. And they're across the board. They're literally across the board. Like, and if they die, oh darn, there's a scheme marker for you to score deathbeds off of, or for you to score spread them out off of, or for you to score breakthrough off. Like, there's so many scheme marker placement schemes. He's a detonate charges master. Like, you're not gonna stop. How do you stop it? You don't kill my stuff? Awesome. That's even better. Like,
And his whole shtick in the aggro crew that I play was, ping ponging your model's health from, down to low, have your opponent dump a bunch of AP into him, and then just healing him up to full. And I mean, that fits perfectly, especially with the amount of speed that he can bring to the table into Turf War.
and
So, yeah,
and the jank master in me looks at Sparks and goes, Stampede.
that's right. That's
So,
right.
min 3 piglets, baby. Min 3 piglets. Min 5 war pigs.
Yep, you and I, we are going to. I'm saying it right now. We are going to have a Sparks-isode where we
Ugh.
can talk about all of the janky shit that we've
He
come up
is
to do with Sparks and why he still sucks, but he's super
so
fun.
great. So great.
Yeah, super fun. Hot take, not a good model still. But that's just me. Again, another episode. I feel like Alton Brown talking about, but that's another episode.
But yeah, Ulix, I've heard it on a couple places now where they talk about how bad Ulix is going to be. Guys, Ulix still struggles. He still has the card. You still have to hit your TNs. It is what it is.
Yeah, he has the same struggles that he had before, but now he actually has strategies that he's awesome at.
I think he's great. I think he's going to be solid.
Yep. So as far as the other one, the only other one I really wanted to talk about was Yan Lo, which I know that he's not really necessarily seen as a summoning master, but he does have some summoning tricks. Obviously, he can bring some models back. And the big thing for him that I feel like is going to be a big impact is Toshiro to a somewhat lesser degree, because the Ashigaru weren't really scheming or scoring anyway. It's just harder to bring them in now, and you can only bring in, well, you could. It was always one a turn, but the Gokudo thing with the way that their summon works is actually a pretty big hit for him. For anybody that doesn't know how Gokudo worked, they're super busted. Basically, if they had I'm not gonna guess at it. I'm going to actually bring up their card so I can read it because it's a pretty big deal.
After this model is replaced with an ancestor, the ancestor heals 3. Then summon a Gokudo within 1 inch of any table line, edge, and at least 6 inches from the enemy deployment zone.
Right. There we go. So you could use them now that Outflank is back in the pool. You could use them as super duper Outflank models because you could put a reliquary on them, replace them with another model, that matches that reliquary. They die, and then you get a free Gokudo all the way off on the table edge, ready to score things like Outflank, Breakthrough, Corrupted Idols, Turf War in this case. Can't do a lot of those things anymore. They can still get summoned super far away, and they can still be used for some scheming and stuff, just like they used to. But the fact that they can't be used for scoring those far-flung strategy points, I think, is actually kind of a big deal. plus Yan Lo saw a bevy of changes, which I'm not going to get into great detail on because I have never played as Yan Lo. I've only played against him numerous times. He was super ultra busted, in my opinion. I thought that he was one of the biggest NPE masters in the game. Um, I think he's now at a more reasonable level. But the Gokudo thing is going to hurt him pretty hard, I think.
I think there's a couple things that are going to knock him down. Now, once again, he's one of those that's probably changed quite a bit that we need to just like see, where the where things land. But there are people out there, I'm sure, that will find ways to make him sing again. But yeah, that Gokudo change is pretty heavy.
Yeah.
I don't think there's, like I said, we can't really talk about Von Stuck. Sonya, you're right. Sonya she's just gonna summon guys to punch her face in and continue to punch her face in. Like no one's ever won a game from summoning Witchling Stalker off of someone who then runs off and scores points.
And McMorning and Lynch are pretty much the same. Colette summon almost doesn't even count as a summon. I mean, the doves are
and
used as regular
summon
summon models.
Flipping hard to get off.
Yeah, McMorning summon is ridiculous. It's so talk about a Rube Goldberg machine.
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of brings us to just a short list of non-master summoners. So that's going to be other models with a primary focus on summoning. This is by no means an exhaustive list. There are a ton of non-master models that summon. So what we did was we kind of cherry picked the ones that we feel like we're going to be affected the most. Right at the top, we got the Spawn Mother. I don't think Spawn Mother is going to see much play anymore.
Poor Mama Spawn Mother. She wasn't seeing any play anyway because the Gups thing is just... They've tried. Like 3 editions now, they've tried to make Spawn Mother and Gups thing work. And it just doesn't. Like summoning those... I mean...
it's too many hoops to jump through without enough reward, and now that they can't interact with strategy markers at all,
and you end up with a model that's like half a summoner, half aggressive, not good at either.
Right, exactly.
Like for 9 points, even McTavish feels better than Spawn Mother.
That's really saying something. I am on the books as being a McTavish hater, and I would take him before I'd take Spawn Mother.
So and those summon changes just double down on how frustrating it is. Like a turn 4 Gup is terrible. A turn 5 Gup is absolutely useless. And I think that kind of goes into like most of these incidental summoners now. Like they become much less, especially if they're not henchmen. Like I'm thinking the Forgotten Marshal. If you don't get the turn to summon with them, they had better be able to do whatever else it is you hired them to do.
For sure.
And like, so I think we're gonna see a lot less of these guys. Monaco probably will see a lot less play. She's still good.
I mean, she's still good, but she's resource intensive, and like the Katashiro got a big hit with the summoning changes. Again, we don't need to get back into that, but they need to be played differently. And then the one Yudo from the upgrade that you can summon, also it is going to be hit pretty hard because that's intended to be a fast, difficult to pin down model. And it's, it'll be fine for, like ley lines because it's still super quick. But aside from that, they're definitely, they took a hit for sure.
Yeah.
So I don't personally, I think Monaco is still playable. I think she will see play, but I don't know that I would be hiring her.
Vasilisa, I think Vasilisa and Widow Weaver are still good because they still do what you want them to do without.
And actually, they're even more important now because they're your only way to summon Stitched. So I think that they're one of the only models that took actually an indirect buff in a sense, just in that you're going to be forced to take them more often, even though their core mechanics didn't actually change. So yeah, I mean they're actually I think one of the few summoning models that's actually in a better place in a sense. not because they got better, but yeah. We already touched on the Forgotten Marshal. One that actually occurred to me as we were putting together the outline for this episode was Dr. Beebe and Calypso. So obviously he's not a summoner, so to speak, but if Calypso gets destroyed and he summons it back in, now it's going to come in with a token, and you're not going to be able to utilize the multiple moves and the onward and all that stuff. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not like it's intended expressly to be a scheming model, but suddenly your resummoned Calypso is not able to do a lot of stuff that you would probably rely on it for late game.
But now, if Bebe uses, hold on one second. Let me check this real quick. If Bebe uses the Calypso's actions to do his deal, does it count to?
Like, does it count as Calypso doing the actions, or does it
Yeah.
count as Beeb doing the actions? Is that what you're getting at?
Correction. Yeah, sorry. Thanks for. My brain
Yeah.
just stuttered for a moment.
I followed. It was fine.
Friendly Calypso models may take actions during this model's activation.
Yeah, if any friendly model has a pilot upgrade, the model gains the willpower. Where is it? Where's the thing I'm looking for?
I'm looking at it right here.
Oh, it's
Control
the
console
upgrade.
says friendly Calypso models take actions during this model's activation. So yes, it would count as
Okay.
Calypso taking the action. So
Beeb and Calypso, I think, are definitely one of the models that would initially fly under the radar that they had taken a nerf. I know that they're generally considered kind of a problem model in Explorers anyway. And while I don't think that this was specifically intended to fix them, it actually, I think, does quite a bit in toning them down. They still have a lot of other problems, but yeah, there we go. So, I mean, that kind of goes over all of the models that we were going to talk about. There's not a whole lot of anti-summoner tech that I think is going to be changed. You did talk about Vincent, and really we're talking about the exorcism trigger, which a variety of models have. There aren't a ton of them in the game. I think it's like Vincent St. Clair, Charm Warders, Exorcists, might be one or two others.
yeah, Vincent's the most important one because he's a henchman, so he can stone for
Right,
it.
so he can stone for it, exactly.
He's going to be a lot more consistent about popping being able to just pop models off the board.
Right, exactly. And basically what we're talking about now is just the problem of all of the non-summon upgrade summons that would dodge around summoning tech.
Jury got a lot more. I think Jury got a lot better.
Jury got a lot better. Those are really the only models that I can think of off the top of my head that got buffed because of the summon token changes. So those are the ones with Exorcism and the Jury in particular. There's still all sorts of other tech picks, but they're not really affected by these changes. Aside from the fact that I feel like Gravity Well, in particular, denying places within that aura, is going to be more effective against summoners because summoners are going to be more incentivized to summon their models towards the center of the board.
Yeah. All right, so now that we're an hour and a half into this, let's
Yeah.
and we've touched on it a little bit, like, but overall, what do you think the difference is from how you play a summoner in GG1 to how you play a summoner now? Like, what is your kind of overall general take on here to here?
So, I mean, a lot of it we've already kind of talked about during the course of the episode. So, we probably don't need to go over, all that stuff over again. But I would say the thing to think about is that you don't you don't have those easy answers when your summoner activates that you used to. So, you have to make some more of the unusual plays or make the hard choices. And yeah, like we've said, like you're going to need to hire in probably some kind of a schemer. Basically, you're going to have to identify a job that you used to be able to accomplish with your summoner and those summoned models that you now cannot, and say, how do I fill that gap in my crew?
So let me ask you a weird question. Do you
Sure.
think that there are summoners that will not be using their summon every turn of the game anymore?
Um, yes. I think Sandeep is a good example of that. Definitely Summer is a very good example of that because his summon gets significantly weaker the
And that
further you get in the
shotgun is
game.
so good.
Yeah, the shotgun's good, and his summon, the further you get into the game and the fewer friendly models you have on the table, the less impactful his summon is going to be.
Mhm.
Especially because you can't get some of those late game, summon
Yeah.
scores off. So yeah, I think that Summer and Sandeep are going to summon less overall. Um, there may be some others, but those are the two that really stand out to me. I still think Kirai probably summons every turn except very late game.
Yeah,
Um,
well, she's still able to summon Icario, so
right, yeah, I mean she can still summon a Kirio, exactly. Um, yeah. So,
um,
what do you think? How do you think things change, John?
I think
I get the feeling you put more thought into this than I have.
I think you gotta like put on your thinking cap a little more when you play a summoner. Not and that is kind of a frustrating thing because like um Sommer takes a lot of brain power to not saying you have to be smart to play Sommer, but he just takes a lot of mental endurance to play because you're having to keep up with auras, you're having to keep up with did I do this? Have I done this turn? What's this? Is this model in the right spot? That kind of thing. And now suddenly you have to throw onto that. Am I keeping alive the models I need to keep alive to score the points? So it's a lot more pressure on how you play as a summoner. So you're gonna have to do more planning and less kind of off the cuff play. Um, which is probably good. Summoners were probably a little too good at being off the cuff and having instant answers um, than they should have
Yeah,
been in the first
yeah,
place.
I think that probably one of the biggest things is that they're going to have to be very, very careful about their scheme selection now.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Um,
For
Not
sure.
that they could just flippantly pick schemes in the past, but there's a lot of stuff in this packet that is that disincentivizes summoners from picking certain schemes.
And I think you'll
Um,
see, and I do think you'll see them go from top one or two picks to third or fourth picks. Um, I think you can still take most summoners in the game and solo a tournament with them. But I don't think you would get as good of results as if you cherry picked your keywords to the pool as
yeah,
much anymore.
yeah,
Unless you're playing
yeah.
Ivan.
Unless you're playing Ivan or Kirai,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
they're just fine.
yeah.
There's no problems there.
I think Ivan all right, so I think Ivan is a little higher on the list than Karai. I think Karai's power is in her power. Um, I don't know that her scheming ability is. I think GG2 is very schemy, and I don't know that if it's as strong. The one thing that kind of like hurts Karai is like deathbeds is kind of frustrating because she doesn't make her models dying don't make corpse markers. So you don't really have a good marker to go off of with
Yeah,
deathbeds.
I mean, I guess. I mean, to the same point, like she makes it harder for your opponent to score it at the same
Yeah.
time.
Whereas like Sommer can pick corpse markers
Right.
and score deathbeds all day long.
And I
Like
don't think that Karai is going to have very much trouble scoring scheme points because she can move her models across the fucking board in activation. It's stupid.
so but I also think like you're gonna take you might take Orion symbols because Shikome are gonna be really good at eating symbols, but you're not necessarily gonna take Karai in every strategy anymore. Like you're gonna look and you're gonna say the biggest change I think is you're going to look and you're going to say, this guy does, and go. I guess I'll jump back to Bayou because it's my most familiar. I can look at this and go, Ophelia is the best at turf war, especially when there are killy schemes in the pool. Sommer's good at turf war, but not as good as Ophelia is most of the time.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I would say that's it's kind of funny because like sometimes I say I don't like ranking masters, and then I go and rank masters
Yeah.
because yeah,
I don't know that it's necessarily about ranking them, but about like each keyword has a job that it does really well. And there's more opportunities for that keyword to do its job as opposed to one guy like Von Stuck in GG1 and GG0 being able to just run the gamut. There's literally was not a bad pool for Von Stuck. And now, well, we got to look at it a little bit, right? We got to reevaluate that. Now, Von Stuck might not be fast enough to get this done. Same thing with Sommer. Sommer doesn't have the super schemers he can summon anymore to be able to, he can't just like hire a crier and then summon 4 bayous and score all of his strategies anymore. He's got to think.
yeah,
He's got to make those choices. And sometimes I think that I think for me in particular, looking at like Sommer as a big Sommer player, I'm not going to be playing him very much this season. And it's not because he's not good. He's still a great, solid master. It's because the amount of effort that I have to put into playing Sommer is just too great when I only want to play one game in a night.
right.
Right?
I follow.
Like,
Yep.
right? There's a level of exhaustion. Now, there's going to come pools, and I'm going to look at them and I'm going to say, Sommer has got this. Like, Sommer's still really, and there's still matchups where I'm like, yeah, Sommer's there. I got this. But, he's not going to, I played him in like 50 to 60% of the pools that I played of GG2. Not going to do that anymore.
GG1
or GG1, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna do
Yeah.
that anymore.
So I mean, we've already kind of started doing the whole last segment, which is the hot takes. So let's just wrap it up real quick. We'll just go through the summoning masters, like the primary summoners. We won't worry about the summon adjacents or the non-masters or what have you, because we've already kind of talked about those. But so just we'll kind of go down the list and just give me a quick, thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you feel like this master is in a good place in GG2, or do you feel like more time is going to be needed
Okay.
to kind of figure out where they lie? I'm not going to go so far as to say anybody's bad in GG2. It's too early, and people really need to feel these masters out. But there are definitely some that are just in an overtly better position. So right from the top, I think I can probably speak for you in that Summer's probably a thumbs down
Mm-hmm.
right now.
Yep.
Yeah, yep. So we've kind of talked about him ad nauseum. So we'll just move on to the next one. So Kirai,
She's way up. She good.
yeah, thumbs up for sure. Sandeep,
Thumb sideways. I think it's more down, but yeah, I think
yeah,
he's less
more
interesting than he was.
evaluation needed
Yep.
for sure. Ivan, I think we both agree, is definitely in a very strong
He's
position.
fine.
He's more than fine.
King of
Um,
Malifaux.
King of Malifaux, that's right. Dashel,
He's fine. He's
yeah,
all right.
I think so too. Dreamer,
Think he's still good. I just don't think we'll see him as much.
I think he's fine.
And let me tell
Yeah,
you too, Neverborn players are a salty, salty lot. So the fact that he did get nerfed means that people will not play him.
yeah. I gotta say, you Neverborn players, I do feel bad for you to some degree because, like, the powers that be at weird, for most factions they giveth and they taketh away, and it seems like for Neverborn they mostly just taketh away. But that's because y'all had some busted shit. So, all right. So Dreamer, I think he's fine. I would still give him a thumbs up. You maybe not so much.
Yeah, I think he's fine. think he's fine. I think that's kind of where he sits. He's good. He still can do what he needs to do.
We got Tara.
She's
I'm
good.
gonna go
She's
thumbs
much
up on
better.
Tara.
Yeah.
I think she's super solid
Yeah.
in GG2. She's gonna do great. And then lastly, we have Asami, who
Still good.
Still good. I would say she's probably veering on that thumb sideways kind of thing, because a lot of the tricky shit that she could do, well, not a lot. Some of the tricky shit that she relied on, she can't really do reliably anymore. But she's still got a lot of
Yeah. And Asami is in that weird Thunder's place where like Thunder's is a weirdly balanced by being unbalanced faction.
Yeah.
Like everything in Thunder's feels good, so
Yeah. I kind of feel like Asami, Sandeep, and Summer all have very similar play styles. And I think of the three of them, Asami works the best in GG2.
Yeah, specifically because she has some easy to drop big boy summons. I think if Joragumo didn't exist, then maybe
she'd be in a bit of a tough spot without the Joragumo, because like to get the Joragumo equivalent in Sandeep, you have to jump through hoops, and Summer just doesn't
hires
have
it.
an equivalent.
Yeah.
He just doesn't.
He just hires Francois or something, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe. Who knows?
First mate. Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, I don't have the answer for that one.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, John, was there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap here?
I think that I really think that we need to come back 6 months. Let's take a look at it, see where we were wrong, see where we were right. And I think I would really like to have, like, if you have an opinion on this, I would love to hear it. I'm busy all the time, but like, hit me up on Facebook. Hit me up on the Bayou Breakdown Facebook page, and I'll get to you when I can. Or I'm on the Swamp Fiends Discord. I'm Mr. Bedlam on the Weird forums. Like, I'd be curious to see if you have different thoughts, or that you just have seen something that I've missed, because like I've been so embedded in this for a while now that some people just have very fresh eyes, and I'm looking at them blearily. Plus I've worked 60 to 70 hours a week for like the past 4 months. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of stuff that just hasn't been identified or sussed out so far with GG2 and all these changes. Just because, I mean, like we were saying, there is stuff that you and I just realized literally while we were prepping for this podcast, even after having talked about GG2 for, the better part of a month at this point. So, yeah. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks, John, for hopping on the podcast on very short notice. We decided to do this one with minimal time to prepare, and I think it came together very well. So, thanks everybody, and don't forget, stay weird, folks.